I said I was leaving. I told my wife I didn't want her to come with me. She said she didn't want to go with me either. I said, "Fuck you," and left. But today, I tried to be nicer. We've said mean things to each other for 14 years, but this time I won't be coming back. In a few days, she'll understand what I mean. For the last 6 months, Jenna, my wife has become very vocal in our fights. I couldn't figure out why, but her sharp words stung. I started avoiding her to keep things from escalating, and I'd spend more time in the car. Sometimes, I'd go back home after Jenna and Carrie, our 13-year-old, had finished dinner. I had to take care of myself. Lately, there have been leftovers, but they seem to have disappeared before I get back. I go by Kurt Kaminsky, technically. My wife turned into a real piece of work. Her sharp words stung me. I started avoiding her to stop things from getting out of hand. Every day, I'd spend longer in the car. Sometimes, I'd slip back home after Jenna and Carrie, our 13-year-old, had finished cooking. I had to take care of myself. Sometimes, there'd be leftovers, but lately, they've been disappearing before I get back. I go by Kurt Kaminsky, but technically, I'm David Kurt Kaminsky. My dad's name is also David, so they gave me the nickname Kurt to avoid confusion. Nope, not a junior dad's David John Kaminsky. Why he skipped the junior bit, I can't fathom. I'd happily answer to junior or even DJ, but nope, just Kurt or Nat. Yep, I'm Polish, well, sort of. I'm an American with Polish roots. I've heard all the jokes, and most of them are new. My name is David Kurt Kaminsky, but my dad is also called David, so they gave me the name Kurt to avoid confusion. Nope, not a junior David John Kaminsky. Why he skipped the junior bit, I can't fathom. I'd happily answer to junior or even DJ, but nope, just Kurt or Nat. Yep, I'm Polish, well, sort of. I've got American and Polish roots. I've heard all the jokes, well, most of them. They keep turning up new ones each year. As the only Pole in this 100,000-strong town, I become the punchline. Technically, I'm half Polish, the other half of my mom's side is German, French, Irish and English. But since I'm a Kaminsky, I'm Polish. My ex-wife ain't who I thought. I only caught wind of this 4 weeks back, as I said I was keeping clear of her due to I'm the only one in this town who is half Polish. My mom is German, French, Irish and English, but because I'm a Kaminsky, I'm Polish. My ex-wife, Mia, isn't who I thought she was. I only found out 4 weeks ago, when I said I was keeping away from her because of the way she'd been acting. One Monday evening, I went to a diner and sat in a booth to order. I overheard 2 guys chatting in the next booth and caught a phrase with "pull." I listened to see if they would mention my friend George, who is clueless about everything. I didn't know the first voice, but the second one was George. I froze. They kept talking, but I heard nothing. Until George told me, we met up at least twice a month. Kurt doesn't know about the car, he doesn't know about the lot. He's just lucky. The waitress came to take my order. I quietly said sorry, got a jet, and left quickly, making sure they didn't see me. I couldn't understand it. Jenna, my wife, with my best friend, the guy who stood by me at the altar. He's also my go-to mechanic. George told me that we met up at least twice a month. Kurt didn't know about it. He was just lucky. The waitress came to take my order. I quietly said, sorry, got a jet. I left quickly, making sure they didn't see me. I couldn't believe it. Jenna, my wife, with my best friend, the guy who stood by me at the altar. He's also my go-to mechanic, and that's not changing anytime soon. Well, not officially. My mechanic is more like an exclusive contractor I rely on solely to fix and inspect all my cars. In case you're wondering, I run a used car dealership. Yeah, I'm a used car salesman. I've heard all the jokes and jabs, but business is booming. People trust that they're getting top-notch cars at fair prices, and if any issues crop up, I handle them. George has always been a top-notch mechanic, and I keep him busy. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Well, not officially, anyway. My mechanic is more like an exclusive contractor that I rely on solely to fix and inspect all my cars. In case you're wondering, I run a used car dealership. Yeah, I'm a used car salesman. I've heard all the jokes and jabs, but business is booming. People trust that they're getting top-notch cars at fair prices, and if any issues crop up, I handle them. George has always been a top-notch mechanic, and I keep him busy and compensate him well. I wanted to bring him on as a staff member, but he cracked a joke about not respecting himself if he worked for a Pole. It was a joke, but I sensed he meant it. Still, I took him on as an independent contractor, though he wasn't all that independent. The truth is, I was his sole source of income, and that fact will be his undoing. Leaving the diner, I cruised the streets, doubting what I'd heard. Was it true, or was it just his boasting? They might have hired him. It was a bit weird, but if what he said was true, their meetings were rare, so it might be a waste of money. But I decided to snoop through her phone and email back home. Jenna was her usual self, which I was fine with. I needed to know the truth before talking to her. When she dozed off, I checked her email and cleaned her phone, which was locked, but it didn't take me long to crack it. I found a few dodgy messages on her phone about a few birthdays, but nothing from George. His name was in her contacts, but I didn't check. I decided to snoop through her phone and email. Jenna was her usual self, which I was fine with. I needed to know the truth before talking to her. When she dozed off, I checked her email. Her phone was locked, but it didn't take me long to crack it. I found a few odd messages, but nothing from George. His name was in her contacts, but I thought maybe he was just talking trash. Yet her recent behavior hinted at something being wrong. Perhaps not with George, but someone else. I hit the hay, feeling restless. It was past 2:43 a.m. when I finally drifted off. The next day at the dealership, George cracked his usual polished jokes. I usually let them slide, but today I snapped. George, what do you even know about Poland? Bet you couldn't find it on a map if you tried. I thought it was strange that he was my friend. Maybe he was just saying something to annoy me. But her recent behavior made me think that she was hiding something. Maybe it wasn't with George, but with someone else. I couldn't sleep, and it was past 2:43 a.m. when I finally fell asleep. The next day, at the car dealership, George told some jokes about Poland. I usually let them slide, but today I got angry. I asked George, what do you even know about Poland? If your life depended on it, you joke about Poland being dim, but I'm sure they could locate the US, maybe even our state. George didn't know what to say. He knew I was on to something. He wasn't the academic MC type, more street smart, good with engines, not textbooks. I guess that's why we hung out in high school. I helped him with his studies, making sure he graduated. Now I'm reconsidering our friendship. He got me thinking about picking a spouse. I retreated. Life depended on it. You joke about Poles being dim, but I'm sure they could locate the US, maybe even our state. Get to work, George. George stared, lost for words. He knew I was on to something. He wasn't the academic MC type, more street smart, good with engines, not textbooks. I guess that's why we hung out in high school. I'd help him with his studies, ensuring he graduated. Now, I'm reconsidering our friendship. He got me thinking about picking a spouse. I retreated to my office, shut the door and mulled over how to gather evidence. Confronting them both head-on wouldn't fly, they just brush it off. I needed solid proof. I rang up a PI in Santa Fe and laid out my worries. He reckoned monitoring them would cost a pretty penny, given their sporadic meetups. You could slap a tracker on her phone. At least you'll know its whereabouts when you check, or set up cameras at home. But unless they're top of the class, notch, meaning high-end, and by that I mean pricey, they'll likely get spotted even with fancy gear. If she's alert, she'll probably catch on. If I were you, I'd tag her phone and hope to catch them red-handed. He suggested a tracking program and waived off payment, saying it was a freebie. Everything I told you is online anyway. Still, you came through with valuable advice. Expect a check. I insisted. If you ever swing by Silver City, drop by Kaminsky's. He offered me a tracking program and said I could keep it for free. He said everything I told you is online anyway. Still, you gave me some good advice. Expect a check, I insisted. If you ever come to Silver City, drop by Kaminsky's. He offered me a lot. I don't usually go out that way, but if I do, I'll look you up. I replied, and I sensed he meant it. A big part of my sales success came from making people feel important. I learned that people crave validation. I opted for the tracking software, saving cash and hassle on cameras. I went to the spot that night when everyone was out cold. I sneaked up and installed the tracking app on her phone, syncing it with mine. It'll run. I'll look you up if I go out that way, I replied. I sensed he meant it. A big part of my sales success came from making people feel important. I learned that people crave validation. I opted for the tracking software, saving cash and hassle on cameras. That night, when everyone was out, I sneaked up and installed the tracking app on her phone, syncing it with mine. It'll run in the background, unbeknownst to her. Finally, I slept soundly. The next day at work, I kept tabs on the app. Jenna worked part-time at the university bookstore, 15 to 20 hours a week. She called her earnings mad money and splurged at the salon. She hit the grocery store and was back home. George was home most of the day, but whenever Jenna was in, he was out working. So, at least for that day, I figured nothing had gone down. That evening, I tried to be more polite to my wife and daughter, suggesting we go out for dinner. My wife seemed a bit interested, our daughter, as usual, hesitated, but I insisted. Dinner went well. I casually brought up George and Jenna shifted uncomfortably, swiftly changing the subject, making me more suspicious. I want to find out if George's words are true. I've got to get to the bottom of this somehow. That night, I didn't check her phone, and I didn't try to see her calls or texts. That evening, I tried to be nicer to my wife and daughter. I suggested we go out for dinner. My wife seemed a bit interested. My daughter was a typical teenager, who didn't know what she wanted. I insisted we go out for dinner. Everything went smoothly. I casually brought up George and Jenna moved uncomfortably, quickly changing the subject. This made me think that George's words might be true. I had to find out the truth. That night, I didn't check her phone. I tried to see if she had any calls or texts, but there were none. Either she had deleted them, or she hadn't made any. When we got into bed, I thanked Jenna for joining us for dinner, and thanked Kurt too. She replied, "Thank you, Kurt. It was a nice surprise." I met her gaze and said, "You might be in luck tonight. It's been a while, and like I mentioned, we haven't been getting along lately." After her usual nightly routine in the bathroom, Jenna got into bed next to me. I felt conflicted about the possibility of closeness with her if she had been on. I couldn't find any information either. She either quickly deleted them or didn't make any at all. I climbed into bed and thanked Jenna. "Thanks for joining us for dinner, Kurt." "It was a nice surprise," she replied, looking at me. "You might be in luck tonight. It's been a while, and like I mentioned, we haven't been getting along lately." After her usual nightly routine in the bathroom, Jenna got into bed next to me. I felt conflicted about the possibility of closeness with her. If she had been unfaithful, did I even want it? I decided to let her take the lead until I had solid evidence that I wouldn't initiate. We did end up being physically engaged, but it was rather ordinary. There was no need for specifics. Well, at least I enjoyed it. Throughout the week, I kept tabs on her phone's location, but I found nothing out of the ordinary. On Saturday night, while she slept, I checked her phone for any messages or calls, yet again, finding nothing. I was close to convincing myself that George was just blowing smoke. I asked myself if I really wanted it. I decided to let her take the lead until I had some real evidence. We did end up having sex, but it was quite ordinary. There was nothing out of the ordinary. On Saturday night, while she was asleep, I checked her phone for any messages or calls, but I found nothing. I was close to believing that George was just trying to impress someone with his stories about his conquests. This wasn't the first time I'd known him to do that, since our school days. I tossed and turned in bed once more, my subconscious refusing to let me sleep at 2 a.m. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to drift off. I decided to go downstairs for a drink, hoping it might help me relax. I sat with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other. I went downstairs for a drink, hoping it would help me relax. I sat with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other. I decided to check it once more, entering the password from our daughter's birth date. Suddenly, it hit me like a bolt of lightning, our daughter's birth date was the key. Jenna's pregnancy had been challenging. We had feared losing her several times due to complications. There was an issue with her Rh factor not matching Jenna's, causing her body to reject the baby. Jenna spent the last 3 weeks of the pregnancy on bed rest too. I decided to check the other one, typing in the password and going to the homepage. Suddenly, I realized that our daughter's birth date was the key. Jenna was pregnant, and we had feared losing her several times because of complications. There was an issue with her Rh factor not matching Jenna's, causing her body to reject the baby. Jenna spent the last 3 weeks of the pregnancy on bed rest to ensure the baby's safe delivery. And indeed, Carrie was born exactly 9 months after our wedding. We were overjoyed at her health, but she proved to be a demanding child. She cried incessantly, had trouble sleeping and struggled with nursing. It was tough going in Carrie's second year. Jenna firmly declared that we weren't having another child. It saddened me, but truthfully, the baby had drained much of the joy from our lives. I mentioned that she was born 9 months after our wedding. They call Carrie was born 9 months after our wedding, and we were very happy. But she was a demanding child. She cried a lot, had trouble sleeping and found nursing difficult. It was hard going in Carrie's second year. Jenna said we weren't going to have another child, which upset me, but the baby had made us less happy. I said that babies born 9 months after a wedding are called wedding night babies because they are conceived on that night or during the honeymoon. I had a sudden idea. If George was right, Jenna might have been pregnant before our wedding night. Jenna was on the pill, and we didn't wait until marriage to have sex. It was an important part of our relationship. The doctor thought that the stress of the wedding might have interfered with her hormones, making the pill ineffective. Children who are born on their parents' wedding night are said to be wedding night babies. This is because they are conceived on that night or during the honeymoon. I had a light bulb moment. If George's claims were true, there was a good chance Jenna was already pregnant before our wedding night. Jenna was on the pill, and we didn't wait until marriage to get physically engaged. It was a big part of our relationship. The doctor thought that the stress of the wedding might have interfered with her hormones, making the pill ineffective. Well, if the pill failed that night, it likely failed that day too. Now I know what to do. There's a 50-50 chance I'm not the father. You know the saying, the early bird gets the worm. Well, George might have been an early bird, but in his case, it seems the early worm gets the birdie. I got off the couch and headed to the bathroom, where I found some cotton swabs. Carrie was fast asleep in her room. She finally settled into if the pills didn't work that night, they probably didn't work that day either. Now I know what to do. There's a 50-50 chance I'm not the father. You know the saying, the early bird gets the worm. Well, George might have been an early bird, but in his case it seems the early worm gets the birdie. I got off the couch and went to the bathroom, where I found some cotton swabs. Carrie was fast asleep in her room. She finally got into a good sleep routine at 4 years old. Before that, it was a struggle. She lay there snoring with her mouth open. It was simple to gently swab the inside of her cheek with a Q-tip. She didn't even stir after I sealed it in a plastic bag. I repeated the process for myself. Even if Carrie turned out to be my biological daughter, it still left questions about Jenna's faithfulness. If she wasn't, I pushed those thoughts aside for later consideration. Sunday. I had a good sleep routine. At 4 years old, it was a struggle. She lay there snoring with her mouth open. It was simple to gently swab the inside of her cheek with a Q-tip. She didn't even stir after I sealed it in a plastic bag. I repeated the process for myself. Even if Carrie turned out to be my biological daughter, it still left questions about Jenna's faithfulness. If she wasn't, I pushed those thoughts aside for later consideration. Sunday was for chores, and we each had our tasks. I took my time, avoiding Jenna and Carrie to keep my emotions in check. I was anxious to confirm my suspicions, but plagued by doubt all day. "Something on your mind, Kurt?" Jenna inquired. I needed a quick answer, so I replied that I was planning to buy a bunch of cars at the next auction to stock up. "The lot money might be tight until I make some sales, but just don't overextend," she advised. I was nervous and anxious, but I kept my emotions in check. I was determined to confirm my suspicions, but I was also worried. Jenna asked me about something, so I gave him a quick answer. I told him that I'm planning to buy a bunch of cars at the next auction to stock up. I might not have much money until I make some sales. I told her that I always refer to the business as ours, but it's really mine. I'd say set it up as a separate entity to protect my personal finances. Living in a religious community, I didn't want business decisions to affect my personal life negatively. I'm thinking of paying off the credit cards and keeping only one open to improve our credit. I told her it was a tactic to mask my strategy, in case she found out about it later. "Do what you think is best," she responded indifferently. I told her that I wanted to set up the business as its own entity to protect my personal finances. I live in a religious community, so I didn't want business decisions to have a negative effect on my personal life. I'm thinking of paying off the credit cards and keeping only one open to improve our credit. I told her it was a tactic to mask my strategy, in case she found out about it later. "Do what you think is best." She responded indifferently. The idea came to me in a flash. It's amazing what your mind can do when you let it. This would minimize any negative consequences if my suspicions prove true. So bright and early on Monday, I took the samples to Western New Mexico University and spoke with someone in the science department. They directed me to the department head, who welcomed the opportunity. I handed over some business cards and offered a 10% discount to anyone working on the samples. He seemed appreciative. "I've been eyeing. I had a great idea. It's amazing what your mind can do when you let it. This would reduce the problems if my suspicions were right." So, bright and early on Monday, I took the samples to Western New Mexico University and spoke with someone in the science department. They told me to speak to the department head, who was happy to help. I gave him some business cards and offered a 10% discount to anyone working on the samples. He seemed happy about it. "I've been wanting a new car to replace my Camry. I might go and look at your selection. If nothing catches my eye, I'll work with you to find something." I said, "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind," he replied as I left the university. I knew I looked happy, but I was worried too. The test results could mean the end of my marriage. When I mentioned buying new cars to Jenna, it was just a cover story for my worried thoughts. But the idea started. The more I thought about it, the more I felt sure that it was the right thing to do. I went into my office and called Paul, who works in sales and also does accountancy for me. I told him what I was thinking. "We're going to make this work," I told him. "There's something else, too. Paul," I continued. "I want to clear the mortgage on my house. Can we work out a lump sum payment? Let me crunch the numbers and get back to you after lunch," he replied as he left. As he went out of my office, I thought about calling my lawyer to ask for a family law referral, but then I decided to wait and see how things turned out. I didn't want to make any quick decisions. After lunch, Paul came back with a spreadsheet. We talked about the next steps for both plans. The next 2 days felt long. I was excited to hear the results of the DNA test. On Wednesday evening, the department head called. He told me the results and said he would come to my office to talk about the car. When he arrived, I showed him into my office. He looked upset before he even spoke. I thought for a moment, then I said, "Hold on, let's see the results first. I haven't found any proof that he's unfaithful yet." After lunch, Paul showed me the spreadsheet, and we talked about what to do next with both plans. The next 2 days went slowly, and I was excited for the DNA test results. On Wednesday evening, the department head phoned to say how it had gone and to arrange to come and talk about the car. When he arrived, I took him into my office. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. He said the samples aren't related, and I nodded. I was disappointed, but I kind of expected it. He gave me a moment before he handed me the envelope with the results. When I glanced back up, my expression had changed. "So, about that car you were interested in?" I asked. "Well, it might sound cliché, but I've hit the big 5.0, and I'm thinking of getting a sports car. I'm thinking of a Mazda Miata," I said, "but I don't have one." I told him I'd be looking for a good condition one at an auction the next day and I'd call him later with any updates. He left, and I told Anna I might leave early, but I'd be around if she needed me. I thought to myself that she wouldn't call, as she rarely needed my help. I drove around the city, and everything seemed different. I called my lawyer, who was sad about the situation. I promised to look through the auction the next day for a well-kept one and call him later with any updates. I told Anna I might leave early, but I'd be around if she needed me. I thought to myself, knowing she wouldn't call, she rarely needed my help. She did most of the tasks herself. As I drove around the city, everything seemed different. I called my lawyer, who was sad about the news, and he told me to speak to a colleague he trusted. After the call, I booked an evening appointment the next day. While I ate a snack at a restaurant, I thought about the past 15 years. I couldn't even say for sure that I had a child from this marriage. I still thought of her as my child, but she wasn't biologically mine. I couldn't pretend I didn't know any more. I knew before, but now there was no going back. One thing. I told a colleague I trusted about it. The next day, I made an appointment to see a doctor. I thought about how I had wasted the last 15 years. I didn't even have a child with her, even though I still thought of her as my child. I couldn't pretend not to know any more. I had known before, but now there was no going back. George would have to face the consequences. It didn't matter that he had been my closest friend for years. With friends like him, enemies seemed better. Jenna would have to face some consequences too. I wondered if she knew that Carrie wasn't mine. Even if she didn't, she kept this truth hidden from me. She had cheated on us on our wedding day with my best man, my supposed friend. I had no reason to doubt what I had heard. She had indulged. I was sure George would be punished. He'd been my best friend for years, but with friends like him, enemies seemed better. Jenna would be punished too. I wondered if she knew that Carrie wasn't mine. Even if she did, she kept this secret from me. She had cheated on us on our wedding day with my best man. I had no reason to doubt what I'd heard. She had an affair with him at least twice a month. Anger began to well up inside me, and before it got out of control, I knew I needed to be alone. I should have called Jenna and told her I wouldn't be home that evening. I couldn't go home. I was afraid I might do something that would get me into jail. She picked up the call. "Hello Kurt, I'm spending the night in Albuquerque to get ready for the auction tomorrow at 8. "Oh," I responded flatly. I started feeling angry towards him at least twice a month. I knew I needed to be alone, away from everyone. I should have called Jenna to tell her I wouldn't be home that evening. I knew I couldn't go home. I was afraid I might do something that would get me into trouble with the law. She answered the call. "Hello Kurt, I'm going to spend the night in Albuquerque to get ready for the auction tomorrow at 8 o'clock. "Oh, okay. Have a safe trip." I didn't say much. I rarely went to Albuquerque for auctions, so it was unusual for me to go there. I wondered if she would take advantage of my absence that night. She would have to think of an excuse for my parents, which wouldn't be easy to explain. But I would check her phone tracker to see if she went elsewhere. I drove to Albuquerque to buy at least 20 cars, including a Mazda. I don't often go to auctions in Albuquerque, so this was a bit different. I wondered if she'd take advantage of my absence that night. She'd have to come up with an excuse for my parents, which wouldn't be easy to explain. But I'd check her phone tracker from time to time during the evening to see if she went elsewhere. I drove to Albuquerque, planning to buy at least 20 cars, including a Miata. I'd arranged for them to be picked up and delivered to my lot after the auction. Now, the problem was who to trust to check the car's mechanics. I knew George wouldn't get any more business from me once he'd finished his current inspections and repairs. When he heard I was IR, he inspected 24 cars. He'd probably think of dollar signs and make his prices higher, but that wasn't going to happen. I'd keep it a secret until the last minute I needed to consult. I had to find someone skilled and reliable to inspect them before shipping them to our small town. Arriving in Albuquerque around 9 a.m., I checked into a Best Western hotel. Despite being the owner, I couldn't justify splurging on an expensive hotel using company funds. The room was comfortable, as was the bed, just what I needed. I'm a simple person with simple needs. Upon entering the room, I immediately checked Jenna's phone tracker, discovering she was still at home, or at least her phone was. Sleep eluded me that night. I couldn't stop thinking about her actions and why she had done them. How could she justify her affair, especially on our wedding day, and continue it for who knows how long? I started to think about our marriage differently. It was never perfect, but I believed in our exclusive love. Now I realized it was a mistake from the very beginning. In the initial years following the wedding, things weren't smooth sailing. Naturally, we had our ups and downs, but we had planned to wait 3 to 4 years before having a family. We had agreed that we would have 3 children before getting married. But George's arrival changed all that. Learning that my best friend was the reason for this change made all the problems seem trivial. All the good times we had shared were overshadowed by this discovery. If Jenna hadn't been involved with George, perhaps things would have been different. If Jenna hadn't been with George, perhaps she would have conceived with me. Maybe her pregnancy wouldn't have been as difficult, and we wouldn't have had such a challenging child, leading her to not desire more children. George shattered my life when he seduced my future wife on our wedding day. Now he entertains her at least twice a month, all the while, likely mocking me. The oblivious fool must face consequences. I thought as I lay down, attempting to calm myself and drift off to sleep. Anger simmered within me once. I thought to myself, I need to calm down, or I'll have a sleepless night. I turned on the TV to watch a comedy show, and the laughter helped me relax. By 11 p.m., I was ready to go to sleep, looking forward to a busy day. The auction went well. I bought some great cars at good prices, and I met with dealers in the Albuquerque area. I asked other dealers about Miatas, and 2 of them had one each, one red. I needed to calm down, or I would not be able to sleep. I turned on the TV to watch a funny show. Laughter helped me to relax, and by 11 p.m., I was ready to go to sleep. I had a busy day ahead of me. The car auction went well. I bought some excellent cars at good prices, and I spoke to dealers in the Albuquerque area. I asked other dealers about Miatas at the auction. 2 of them had one each, one red and one black. I negotiated possible deals, but I needed to know the client's favorite color. Both dealers agreed, and said that they would handle the transaction. I should have gone to this auction more often. Talking to other businessmen in the same industry made me want to grow my business. It also made me forget about my personal problems. In the afternoon, I had a meeting with a lawyer. The news was not good. I might lose half of my money. I was also going to have to pay alimony and child support for a child I didn't even have. But at that moment, I decided not to get a divorce. Instead, I decided to leave her with George's child. I would pay off the mortgage on the house. She could stay there, but with only my name on the mortgage, she wouldn't be able to sell it. If she continued to pay the taxes and utilities while living somewhere else, she wouldn't be able to sell the house. However, I still needed to make a decision about my business. I had registered it as a corporation. I had a gut feeling that, without proper protection, I could risk losing my IT consulting business. So, I made my business lawyer my priority. When I got home that day, I was utterly exhausted. I told Jenna how tired I was. I was planning to have a shower and go to bed. I muttered as I went to the bedroom. "Want dinner?" she asked. "No, I had a late lunch," I replied. At least she cares enough to ask. The shower was really nice. It felt like my troubles were washing away, even though problems persisted. I felt better when I thought about solutions. Soon after I went to bed, I fell asleep. The past week had been stressful, but I was starting to feel better because I had a plan. I got up early and felt full of energy. I went to the office before Jenna and Carrie got up. There were spreadsheets and financial reports everywhere. I made a plan for what I was going to do next. I told Paul about the 23 car purchases and told Anna to stop giving work to George. I told her that we had to keep this a secret. She looked at me strangely. "You're the boss," she said. "Thank you, Anna. You're very important at 9 o'clock. I phoned my business lawyer for advice. She said that while my business is registered, she might still force a sale to claim half its value. She suggested selling before then. "I can't," I said. "It's my life." I told her I'd think about it and get back to her by the end of the week. This news hit hard. I'd worked hard to build my business, like raising a child. Unlike Carrie, I felt angry, but I am an experienced businessman and I know how to keep my emotions in check. I decided to focus on my business. First, I contacted Doug, who confirmed what George had said. Doug Kurt Kaminsky replied, "I've got information about 2 Miatas. You might like the red and black ones. Are you still interested if the price is right?" I asked him which color he preferred. "Let me show you both. We can look at the numbers afterwards. Even if we can't agree, I can sell it easily." I assured him that I could. "Pick." He pressed red, which is a bold statement, but it fades faster. "Black's elegant, but it heats up quickly." He's planning to garage it. "Yes," he confirmed. "Red it is then. When can we meet? Monday or Tuesday?" Perfect call upon arrival. Deal after hanging up. I dialed the dealer with the red Miata to negotiate a swap. He showed interest in the BMW sitting on my lot for 3 months, recognizing its better prospects in a larger city. Meanwhile, George showed up with several cars still awaiting repairs as an independent contractor. His flexible schedule suited my needs, but I was angry with him for overhearing the salesman talking about the 23 cars arriving. George asked about the schedule. "Hey Kurt, when are these cars from the auction coming in?" "I want to plan my repairs," he said. "The auction house will handle the delivery, likely late next week or early the following week," I told him. I was really struggling to keep calm in the presence of this betrayer, but I managed to laugh as he left that weekend. I distanced myself from him. I was no longer worried about Jenna checking her phone tracker when she was out. I only felt angry towards her. I thought it was wrong to look after another man's child. On Monday, I went back to the car show. I arranged to swap the BMW for the Miata. We left for Albuquerque to finish the deal. "We'll have lunch when you get there," the dealer said. I told Anna not to worry about me being away all day. I told her to keep an eye on things. She said she would, and I believed her. We all agreed that it was time for a raise. The journey and lunch were nice, and I got on well with the dealer. I was driving back in the Miata, with the wind playing with my hair. I enjoyed the freedom, and I decided to treat myself. I decided to buy a black car, because I realized I didn't need more than a 2-seater. Soon, I pulled into our driveway in a red sports car. Jenna looked out of the window and said something to Carrie, and they both went outside to see why. "Why do you need this car, honey? We need something with a back seat for Carrie," she remarked, in a patronizing way. "I just picked it up from Albuquerque for a client. Thought you might want to take a ride." I responded, "No, honey, I'm not a fan of small cars." Jenna retorted, with a hint of disdain, "Carrie," I called, motioning for my daughter to join us. "No, Dad," I replied. "I'm already teased enough because of my last name. I don't want to be seen with a Polish used car salesman." Her words st. I was shocked by how direct I was being, and I wondered where this attitude came from. Glancing at Jenna, I realized she didn't think the car's comment was important. Now, both the women in my house were being disrespectful. Teenagers might not always get on with their parents, but the way she spoke made me question if my family life was real. "I'm going for a drive. I'll be back soon," I announced, shifting the car into reverse and driving off. Ed, frustrated, drove through Silver City until he got home at about 9:30. He went straight upstairs, had a quick shower, and got into bed. When he didn't come out of the shower, Jenna came into the room, shining a bright light in his eyes. Squinting, he closed his eyes. "Are you upset because we didn't choose a sports car? Are you not going to spend time with your family? You're not just Polish, you're childish," she chided. I was confused by her sudden attitude change. I felt sure that George spending time with him had made her less interested in my heritage, which she now passed on to our daughter, even though she wasn't even my daughter. I realized that I needed to accept that fact. "It looked like you and your daughter would rather do without a Pole, so you might as well just leave," I retorted, heatedly. Her attitude only made me more angry. I felt sure that she would regret treating me this way from then on. I was confused by her sudden attitude change. I felt it was because of time George spent with him. It seemed to make her forget about my heritage, which was now affecting our daughter, even though she wasn't even my daughter. I had to accept that. "Looks like you and your daughter would rather do without a Pole, so you might as well just leave," I retorted, angry. Her attitude only made me more angry. I would regret treating her this way. The next day, the atmosphere at the Kaminsky home became cold and silent. I contacted Doug, who came over to inspect the Miata. He was thrilled with it. After discussing the numbers, he was pleasantly surprised by the great deal he received. It was $3,000 less than the Kelly Blue Book. As he was finishing the paperwork, he mentioned that my best friend handles purchasing for the university. We rotate about 16 cars every 2 years. It might not be much, but could you speak with him? The mood at home became tense. The following day, Doug came over to inspect the Miata. He was thrilled with it. After discussing the numbers, he was pleasantly surprised by the great deal he received. It was $3,000 less than the Kelly Blue Book. As he was finishing up the paperwork, he mentioned that my best friend handles purchasing for the university. We rotate about 16 cars every 2 years. It might not be much, but could you speak with him? I'm always happy to do business, and I'll ensure he gets a good deal. I replied, I'll have Jim reach out to you by the end of the week. Thank you. I said, that's how I expanded my business, by treating people well and showing appreciation for their referrals. On Wednesday, my lawyer called. Hey, Kurt. I think I have a solution to your potential issue. Can you swing by this afternoon to discuss it? Absolutely. I'm eager to get started. I was happy to do business and make sure he got a good deal. I replied, I'll have Jim get in touch with you by the end of the week. Thank you, he said. That's how I expanded my business, by treating people well and showing appreciation for their referrals. On Wednesday, my lawyer called. Hey, Kurt. I think I have a solution to your potential issue. Can you come by this afternoon to discuss it? Absolutely. I'm eager to get started. Later that day, I heard the plan and was pleased with it. It would take about 2 weeks to put it into action, but if successful, it would be worth it. Over those 2 weeks, I gradually moved my personal items and tools from my house to an apartment nearby. Meanwhile, George awaited the arrival of the 24 cars to do some work, but I kept delaying him. During the past weekend, I did some yard work and cleared out my closet and drawers when Jenna and Carrie weren't around. Jenna did laundry. Later that day, I found out about the plan and liked it. It would take about 2 weeks to do, but if it worked out, it would be worth it. During those 2 weeks, I slowly moved my personal things and tools from my house to an apartment nearby. At the same time, George was waiting for the arrival of the 24 cars so he could do some work, but I kept making him wait. Over the past weekend, I did some yard work and cleared out my closet and drawers when Jenna and Carrie weren't around. Jenna did laundry during the week so she didn't notice my closet being empty. This brings me back to that Monday night when I told Jenna I'm leaving. She once again started being rude and disrespectful, targeting me for being Polish and a used car salesman. In the past, I would go to a motel for a night or two, depending on how angry I was. The following Tuesday morning, I arrived at the parking lot early and gathered my employees in the conference room. It was a regular during the week so that she wouldn't notice the emptiness of my closet. This makes me think back to that Monday night when I told Jenna I'm leaving. She once again started being rude and disrespectful, saying that I was a used car salesman just because I was Polish. In the past, I would go to a motel for a night or two, depending on how angry I was. The following Tuesday morning, I arrived at the car park early and got my employees together in the meeting room. It was a regular weekly meeting, so nothing seemed unusual. I said, "Good morning, as you all know, the cars I bought a couple of weeks ago arrived yesterday afternoon. They've all been checked and prepared for sale. We won't be using George for any more work here. If he asks, just say we're going in a different direction. You've all been fantastic, you're like family to me, so it's tough to discuss what next." Pausing to wipe a tear, I continued, "I've sold the business." They looked at me, which I wasn't expecting, but nothing changes regarding your roles except for Anna, who will take on some of my duties and receive a corresponding pay rise. Despite their astonishment, they began congratulating Anna, recognizing her hard work and worthiness. "Anna, please come and talk to me after the meeting." There are some things we need to discuss, I said. I'll still be involved in the company, but only in an advisory capacity and may occasionally sell. I don't want to interfere with your sales. I assured her they were all relieved that I would still be there, but only sometimes, after the meeting. As we left, George asked, "Hey, why wasn't I invited to the meeting?" He was surprised because it was for staff only, and he wasn't an employee. I explained, and he seemed shocked. "I see the cars have arrived. I'll get to work on them," he said. "No need. They've already been prepared for sale." I replied firmly, leaving him stunned, "But I always check the cars." He protested, "George, I'd still be around, even if only sometimes, after the meeting." As we left, George asked, "Hey, why wasn't I included in the meeting?" I explained that it was for staff only, and he wasn't an employee. He seemed surprised. "I see the cars have arrived. I'll get to work on them," he said. "No need. They've already been prepared for sale." I replied firmly, leaving him stunned, "But I always check the cars." He protested, "George, I've sold the business, and the new owner wants to go in a different direction." I informed him, holding back my anger. "I'll save that for another day." I kept it brief, realizing sometimes less is more. "I can't believe you sold the business," he exclaimed, making it about himself. "What now? You can pick up your check for the past 2 weeks. Work it wasn't much. Anna rarely used your services," I stated bluntly. He'd been expecting to work on the cars, but he was out of luck. I didn't feel sorry for him. I just wished I could tell him what I really thought of him when I spoke with Anna. I asked her to keep our conversation secret. "Of course, Kurt, I'll never tell anyone what you don't want me to." She assured me that this is the plan I've set up. I've registered 2 companies in Nevada. One will buy the car park, and the other will buy the company. I own all the shares in both. Eventually, I'll divorce Jenna and make sure she doesn't get the business. "Why?" she asked. I've moved out. Jenna doesn't know yet, but I'm not going back. She had an affair with George. Actually, Carrie isn't my daughter. I think she's George's. I'm not sure if Jenna knows, or if George does either. They'll find out soon. I won't get a divorce, but I'll keep paying the bills for our house. That way, if she files for divorce, she can't claim abandonment and take everything. I don't want her to take over the business. I agreed to the company being bought twice because I let them deal with it. The money will be spent by the time she gets the divorce sorted. I don't earn much from consulting, and I only get a few commissions. Anna, you can handle daily business. I'll be available if you have any questions, but I trust you to do the right thing. I explained to Anna, who smiled at the news of the new owner, but her expression changed when she heard about Jenna and George. She really admired and respected this woman. "I have one more thing to say. I have one more task for you to do before I go. I need you to order a new sign and letterhead for the business. We're changing the business name to Helpless Car. This will show George and Jenna that the business is under new ownership." I explained that I spelled out the name to make sure she got it right. She looked puzzled. "I'll explain the name choice someday. For now, just know it tells the whole story." I told her, though she seemed puzzled, that she trusted me enough to follow through with that. I said goodbye to everyone left. I got into my car and drove to Albuquerque. About 2 hours later, I received a call from Jenna. I hadn't expected her to call so soon. This was a familiar pattern. I'd leave for a day or 2, she'd call, we'd talk, and I'd return. Things would change for a while, then go back to how they were before, we'd have another argument, and the cycle would repeat. I decided to answer the call, curious to hear what she would say this time. "Hello?" I used the car's speakerphone to ask Kurt, "What's going on?" She sounded hesitant. "Nothing much, just heading to Albuquerque." "Why are you going there?" I asked. To pick up the car. So what I heard must not be true. George must have called you. Perhaps he asked your mistress what's going on with her husband. I don't know. What did you hear? She pressed. George called and said you sold the. She revealed why he would call you. I questioned her, confused. She corrected herself. Hek, your best friend. He was curious if I knew what a best friend was. I was a joke to him. A silly, clueless person about what was happening with his own wife behind his back. Apparently, my family felt embarrassed that I was a used car salesman, so yes, I sold the business. Now you won't have to bear that stigma anymore. Shouldn't we have discussed this first? She worried, likely concerned. About our job, this is my company. I owned it before we got married, and I can sell it whenever I want. I just hope the new owner treats my former employees well. Did you get a good price for it? Fred asked about her standard of living. I didn't care. I just knew I needed a change. I'll start looking for a job after I take some time off to relax. What about the mortgage? She panicked. I used the money to pay off the house. You only need to worry about utilities and taxes. What about food and gas? She asked, sounding almost hysterical. I think I forgot those. Can you work longer hours? I asked. When are you coming home? She pressed. I won't return, I said casually. Remember what you said when I left that evening? She asked. Don't worry. I'll figure out how to cover the bills so the power won't be cut off. You can't do this, Kurt. You need to come back. Her voice was desperate. No, I really don't want to, I responded, not showing any emotion. Kurt, please don't do this, she cried. I've already made my decision. What about your daughter? She tried to appeal to my emotions. Carrie, the girl who's ashamed of her last name and the fact that her father is, or was, a used car salesman. Kurt retorted. She's just a 13-year-old girl. You can't take this to heart. Well, it doesn't matter anymore, she replied. I won't be back, so don't say those things to me. I hung up and switched off the phone, letting her think about what I'd said. I knew she'd try calling me back and get annoyed when I didn't answer. After calming down from the call, I tried to enjoy the easy drive to Albuquerque. I thought her next move would be to contact her lover for more information and to tell them what I'd said when I got to my destination. I switched my phone back on and noticed I had 5 missed calls. I listened to 3 from Jenna, 1 from George and 1 from Anna. I immediately called Anna. Hi Anna, sorry my phone was off. I've been getting unwanted calls. Yes, I know. Your wife and George called me to find out where you were. I told them you don't own this place anymore, so you won't be coming back. I hope everything is okay. Anna informed me that it was great. I replied that they hassle you too much. Tell them you'll call the police for phone molestation. Station, I like what she said. Kurt, you might feel like you don't have family or friends anymore, but trust me, you do. We are your family, and always will be. Thank you, Anna. You know just what to say. I hope your husband realizes how lucky he is. I remarked, trust me, he does. He tells me all the time. Never take that for granted. She assured me I wouldn't. I promised. After ending the call, I debated whether to call my unfaithful wife or that idiot. Nah, let them stew. I exited the car. I went to the Audi office in the car park where the owner was waiting. He wanted to swap my car for an Audi he had. He looked at the car everywhere and said it was in perfect condition. He said he could sell it in a week. I felt like I was getting the better deal. He said I could return the favor sometime. I told him I'm not here to make money, I just want a sports car. 30 minutes later, I was back on the road, the top down, enjoying myself. I went to the Audi office in the car park. The owner was there. He wanted to swap my car for an Audi. He looked at the car from every angle. He said he could sell it in a week. I felt like I was getting the better deal. He said I could return the favor sometime. I told him I'm not here to make money, I just want a sports car. 30 minutes later, I was on my way again. I was happy with the ride. I decided to go to Santa Fe. I drove through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah and Colorado. I stayed close in case Anna needed me. I checked in with her a few times. After things seemed to have calmed down, I headed west. They kept calling. At first I was annoyed, then they apologized. Finally, they sounded a bit resentful. I listened but shrugged it off when they reported my canceled credit card. I laughed. George even called, saying I was a villain for leaving Jenna. I set off for the north, stopping at Santa Fe for a couple of weeks. I traveled through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah and Colorado. I stayed close to Anna in case she needed me. I checked in with her a few times, and when things seemed to have calmed down, I headed west. They kept calling, first annoyed, then apologetic, and finally a bit resentful. I listened but ignored it when they told me my credit card had been cancelled. I laughed when George even called, saying I was a villain for leaving Jenna. I laughed some more when Carrie called. My lawyer texted me, saying Jenna threatened legal action if I didn't return. I called her back, saying hello, Kurt. She made threats to you, yes, but if you're still paying for the house, don't worry. She'll struggle to prove it. I told him I can offer something better. I told him I have a recording of me declaring my departure, and she insists I don't come back. It's gold, send it my way. He asked if I laughed some more. My lawyer texted me. Jenna threatened legal action if I didn't return. I returned his call. Hello Kurt, speaking. So, my wife made threats to you, yes, but if you're still paying for the house, don't worry. She'll struggle to prove it. I assured him I can offer something better. I continued, I have a recording where I declare my departure, and she insists I don't come back. It's gold. Send it my way. He requested that if she causes any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let them sort it out. Thanks. I'll check in next week to see how it's going. I roamed the Southwest. The Miata wasn't the coast, but it was a blast. I caught glances, even a few flashes from bored, middle-aged women, but I wasn't seeking that after all. I was still hitched. No matter what, I drove to Reno, then Lake Tahoe, the coast, Napa Valley, and zigzagged along. I took the Highway 1 from San Diego to Las Vegas, then to Phoenix, without rushing. I chatted to people in car parks. Some people envied a guy in his 30s who could just hit the road after covering 8,000 miles. I decided to head back to Silver City. When I arrived at Helpless Auto, my team welcomed me warmly. They included a few new faces. They were all happy to see me. I went into Anna's office, which used to be mine. She looked up and saw me. Her smile got bigger. She stood up, walked around her desk and gave me a hug. After we chatted for a bit, I asked, "Do you think I can treat everyone to food and drinks at Wrangler's? Can you close the store by 5? It was already 3. Absolutely. I'll make sure of it. The whole team will be there. After saying goodbye to them and telling them about our meeting in 2 hours, I left them feeling good. Next, I went to see her smile widened even more. Rising from her chair, she walked around her desk and gave me a tight hug. After chatting for a bit, I asked, "Do you think I can treat everyone to food and drinks at Wrangler's? Can you close the store by 5? It was already 3. Absolutely. I'll make sure of it. The whole team will be there." After bidding them farewell and announcing our meeting in 2 hours, I left them in high spirits. Next, I paid a visit to my lawyer. During my travels, he told me that Jenna had tried to claim abandonment to seize my assets, but he had managed to stop her. We discussed our next steps at 5. I joined the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We enjoyed a fantastic dinner, and it was great to catch up with everyone as the evening wound down. They began to leave, leaving only Anna and me. She gazed at me and said, "You know, Kurt, you might feel powerless and lost, but you're mistaken. You simply placed." My lawyer told me that Jenna had tried to take my money and things, but he stopped her. We talked about what to do next at 5 o'clock. I met the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We had a great dinner, and it was nice to see everyone. As the evening went on, people started to leave, but Anna and I were still there. She looked at me and said, "Kurt, you might feel powerless and lost, but you're wrong. You just trusted the people you loved." I looked at her and she looked back. It took a while, but I remembered what she said about the new name, and I understood what she meant. You might be Polish, but those jokes don't define you. They insult your heritage and who you are. Thank you, Anna. You're the main reason I came back. I had to see how you dealt with my responsibilities. I'm happy to say you haven't taken my place, you've made your own. I had an amazing mentor. She was thankful, we hugged, and then she left to go to her husband, who looked really happy. I went back to the apartment I hadn't been to in 3 months. The air felt stale, so I opened the windows to let in some fresh evening air. I got a beer and sat on the terrace next to the pool. There were people swimming and a family having fun nearby. My mind went to Jenna and me. We used to have big dreams. And dreams when we got married. Now they seem to have gone. Looking at the wall clock, I saw it was about 8:30. I knew it was time to deal with the situation. I got into my car and drove to my house, which was still mine even though I had bought it before I got married. I was the only person whose name was on the house papers. I felt disappointed when I arrived. The garden was untidy and the porch was dirty. It was light, so I thought Jenna was probably home. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, Carrie answered. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Dad, hi. Is your mum home?" she stuttered, before yelling, "Mom's in the kitchen." I heard Jenna's tense, high-pitched voice. "What's wrong?" Carrie continued to stare at me and loudly exclaimed, "Dad." Jenna appeared from around the corner, spotting me and shrieked, "Where are you going?" I decided to respond calmly. I said, "I'm not going to cry about traveling." Just then, George came out of the bedroom wearing just his underwear. "Oh, I see. The whole family is here, Mum, Dad, and the child," I said. "What on earth are you talking about?" Jenna interrupted angrily. "I guess George has stepped in to fill my role after all. It's rightfully his." Jenna looked puzzled, while George's tone turned visibly angry. "Actually, young lady, you seem to be misinformed." I interrupted, knowing she disliked being corrected. "George never worked for me, did he? It was his own choice, so I couldn't have fired him. I cover all the bills, utilities, and car insurance." Jenna interrupted, "What about groceries and gas for the car? You had a job, didn't you? Did you lose it? It used to cover expenses while I was away. Do you think you can just come back and take over?" Jenna challenged, "No, I'll wait until you and your partner find somewhere else to live." It was clear they were staying together in my house, and Carrie seemed fine with it. Jenna retorted, "I'm not leaving my home, not yet anyway. This is my home. It was mine before we got married, and only my name is on the house papers." I said, "Jenna, I'm not leaving. So now it's his home, too?" Jenna insisted. "That's not how the law works. I pay the bills and the taxes, so I'm the legal owner, even though I've been away for a short time. It's still mine. Don't worry. I'll give you until the end of next month to find a new home. Just make sure you take. I'm not leaving my home, okay? This is my home. It was mine before we got married, and only my name is on the house papers. I said, Jenna, you're wrong. The law says I'm the owner because I pay the bills and taxes. But you've been away for a short time. Still, it's mine. I'll give you time to find a new place by the end of next month. Just make sure you take your daughter with you. What do you mean, your daughter? She's our daughter, Jenna. You couldn't have said it more accurately. I laughed. Jenna looked confused. She turned to Carrie. I know you don't like being called Polish, so here's some news. Your real father isn't me. It's George. Silence filled the room. After a moment, Jenna whispered, Yes, Jenna. It seems your carelessness on our wedding day resulted in a child, but not mine. Good news for you, Carrie. You can now take your real father's last name and become Carrie. I wonder if perhaps Mom chose the name Carrie out of respect for her lover. I pondered aloud. Jenna and George exchanged looks. The color draining from George's face, he asked, What about you, Jenna? Don't you want to step up as a father? Well, that's unfortunate. It's time to take responsibility, but look at the bright side. It's just 4 more years until college. I remarked, Jenna. This is good news for you, Carrie. You can now take your real father's last name and become Carrie. I wonder if perhaps Mom chose the name Carrie out of respect for her lover? I said, pondering. Jenna and George exchanged glances. The color drained from George's face. What about you, George? Don't you want to step up as a father? Well, that's unfortunate. But look at the bright side, it's just 4 more years until college. Nah, and George nearly echoed each other. I don't believe in that. With a swift motion, I handed them the DNA report. See for yourselves. They snatched it, glanced at it, and then both collapsed. Carrie, inform the love birds that your mom will be served with divorce papers next week, along with an eviction notice. I walked away. Throughout my absence, I couldn't shake the thought of whether this affair had been ongoing during our marriage. Had she chosen me, or was I just a pawn? I felt helpless, ignorant and vulnerable. George had made fun of me behind my back and even joked about my Polish heritage in front of me. The next morning, I drank a lot of beer. I went to see the lawyer to start the divorce process, even though I knew I would have to sell the house and split the money. Because I didn't have a job, I wouldn't have to pay maintenance or child support, especially with another man taking my place. That's what I was hoping for, the betrayal by Jenna and George. It was really hard to rebuild trust. With a man or woman, it would be hard. Maybe I should see a therapist. As the divorce started, I went back to work at the dealership. I told my colleagues I was not the boss now and only needed 1 sale a week to pay my expenses. I even said I would do one when I had to pay child support. I made sure I had no money in the bank, only enough for the basics at the end of the month. Jenna hired a lawyer, but I did not understand why. She might not be able to pay for one. But maybe he'd do it for free. Either way, they'd be in for a shock. They looked really closely at my accounts, but they couldn't find anything important. I heard from my colleagues that George visited the dealership almost every day for the first 2 weeks after I left, trying to get Anna to give him work. But she kept turning him down. In the end, he gave up. Now he's sorry he didn't get his ASC certification, because the only job he can get now is at Valine, doing quick oil changes for $13 an hour. I hope Jenna will work full-time or will struggle financially. I contacted the realtor and told Jenna I was selling the house, expecting to split our assets 50-50ths. She had already received an eviction notice, so she needed to leave before the sale closed. One evening, Jenna knocked on my door and I let her in. What do you want, Kurt? Can we talk? She asked. I'm not sure. It's a good idea. We're in a legal battle. I replied, come on, Kurt. It's just us, no lawyers. Can we have a civil conversation? She pleaded, all right, but let us go to Denny's. I suggested, there'll be witnesses. I thought to myself, I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her at Denny's. After exchanging pleasantries, I asked, Jenna, why? She hesitated before answering. I guess the simple answer is that I liked both of you and couldn't choose. You were seeing both of us at the same time. I questioned Jenna, who looked down and admitted yes, but George warned me not to tell you because he knew it would ruin your relationship with him. Then why did you say yes when I proposed? I asked because I loved you. George replied that he loved her too, but he knew he wouldn't make a good husband, so they ended things when you proposed and he focused on their relationship and their wedding plans. On the day of the wedding, you were with him. I asked Jenna if she had ever stopped after hesitating. She decided to tell the truth. We never ceased. We had our quiet times, but we typically met, she replied. I questioned, you were seeing both of us at the same time? Yes, but George warned me not to tell you because he knew it would ruin your relationship with him. Then why did you say yes when I proposed? I asked. Because I loved you, and George replied, I loved him too, but I knew he wouldn't make a good husband, so we ended things when you proposed and I focused on us and our wedding plans. So on our wedding day, you were with him. I probed, Jenna, start crying and confess, yes, everything was a mess. Then what was it? I pressed further. I didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose me. She admitted, well, now you have each other, and your child. By the way, she did a great job with the name. I didn't even realize until later, during my travels. I didn't know. Carrie wasn't yours. I revealed. Jenna looked at me and said, CT. I still love you. It's. Jenna started crying and admitted that everything was a mess. I asked her what had caused it. She replied that she didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose her. She admitted that they had each other and their child. I asked her if she had thought about the name she had given him. She replied that she hadn't realized until later, when she was traveling. She said that she hadn't known that Carrie wasn't his. I asked her if she still loved him. She replied that she did, but that I might not understand what love truly meant. I replied that I loved her more than anything, and that she clearly couldn't say the same. She retorted that she loved him, but that now she felt nothing but contempt. I stated firmly that Jenna realized their relationship was over, and that there would never be an us again. Before she left, I had to ask one final question: had she ever stopped after hesitating? She decided to tell the truth. We never ceased, we had our quiet times, but we typically met. It's nice to hear you say that, Jenna, but I don't think you understand what love really means. I loved you more than anything, and you clearly don't love me back. I loved you, but now I feel nothing but contempt. I realized our relationship was over, there would never be an us again, so I left. Jenna, have you ever stopped after hesitating? No, we never ceased. We had our quiet times, but we typically met twice a month. I was hoping for a different response, but I appreciate your honesty. One more thing, a year ago, your behavior towards me changed. What triggered it? I started pushing for a bacchanalia, not involving you. I might have considered it if you were involved, but we couldn't navigate it. His persistence made me resent you for something I knew you wouldn't agree to. It's odd, but I thought I could have both of you. My men were together and didn't like you for not being open to it. She admitted it. Did you go through with it? I asked. No, I thought about it, but then you left and everything fell apart. She admitted. Well, now you're free to do it. Your choices don't affect me anymore. I said, thinking our conversation was ending. I paid the bill and we went to our cars. 4 months later, we stood in front of a judge and finished our divorce. George was there too. As we left the courthouse, Jenna suggested maybe, let's go for a drink, the old-fashioned way. Okay, I'll go with you. I'm glad we're finally friends. Now they can be together and deal with their own problems. They're perfect for each other. Jenna will have to settle for a lower standard of living. All right, maybe I'm still a bit resentful. I demand respect.